Hello and welcome to Africa Today. I am Esther Mokwariola. Home to the African Union headquarters, Ethiopia is often described as the continent's diplomatic capital, where there is never a shortage of summits to attend, with bilateral handshakes to show for it. These are interesting times for leadership in Africa, where the wave of resignation literally took a connecting flight from South Africa to Ethiopia, with Haile Mariam Desalegn recently stepping down as Prime Minister. And so we ask, what are your thoughts on political developments in Ethiopia following the resignation of Haile Mariam Desalegn? You can join the conversation and share your thoughts with us on Twitter at TVC News NG. We take a report and Africa Today will continue. Welcome on board.
Ethiopia government declared a state of emergency following the resignation of its Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn, with the Defense Minister saying it will last for 6 months. Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn announced a surprise resignation in a televised speech last Thursday. The first time in modern Ethiopian history that a sitting Prime Minister had quit.
Yesterday, the Council of Ministers deliberated on the need of a declaration of a state of emergency and unanimously decided to declare the state of emergency, and it has been put in place as of yesterday evening.
Since January, Ethiopia has released more than 6,000 prisoners charged with taking part in mass protests and, in some cases, offenses against the state. Many of the prisoners took part in the anti-government protests in 2015 and 2016 in the country's two most populous provinces, Oromo and Amharic communities, who complained they are underrepresented in country's corridors of power. Outbreaks of violence had continued in parts of the country, and the government was banning protests along with the preparation and dissemination of publication that could incite and sow discord.
Even though the government has made various efforts to rectify its problems from time to time, these acts of chaos have resulted in the loss of lives of several innocent civilians. A major economic destruction and numerous citizens have been displaced from their location. In addition to this, the right of citizens to move from place to place freely and make economic benefits has been endangered.
Ethiopia is East Africa's biggest and fastest growing economy and a Western ally in the fight against Islamic militancy. But right groups have often criticized the government for clamping down on political opponents and the media.
Ethiopia is witnessing its second state of emergency in 3 years, a day after Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn resigned abruptly amid social unrest in the troubled East African nation. It isn't yet clear who would replace Haile Mariam, who has been in power since 2012. As the unexpected move came against the backdrop of anti-government protests and a nationwide state of emergency that started in October 2016. Joining me in the studio on Africa Today, I have Nelson Ekujumi, social commentator and a political analyst. And on Skype, I have Dr. Johannes Gedamu, lecturer of political science at Georgia College, United States of America. Thanks a lot for being a part of the program, gentlemen.
Thank you very much for having us.
All right, let me begin with you now, Dr. Johannes. Let's look at the reason behind Haile Mariam stepping down from office. He said, according to him, it hopes it will end years of unrest and political upheaval, but still there are varied speculations on the reasons why he stepped down. What do you think could be his reason, apart from what we hear he says?
Well, thank you so much, first of all, for having me on the show here. Definitely, Mr. Haile Mariam Desalegn is a technocrat, and Ethiopians had high hopes of this prime minister to enact some reforms towards democracy. But what happened was, unfortunately, he failed in all of his expectations that he set for himself, but also on the people's expectations. So what happened was that there was a clear vacuum of political leadership in the ruling party, in the ruling coalition that's known as EPRDF. PRDF is made up of these four political parties. So that has been very much clear as we witnessed the last 2-3 years, where we saw unrest, very much tumultuous political period, and a lack of political leadership that could listen to the people, that could basically enact political reforms that would calm the situation. So my take is that Mr. Hailemariam Desalegn, I would believe, may have been pressured by the ruling coalition political elite, or at least he recognized that he never had the political power to continue as a prime minister, so that stepping aside may be a better option for him.
Well, Nelson, from what he's just given out, that's Dr. Johannes, do you suppose that perhaps it is because he is being perceived as weak in terms of holding the country together, knowing that the country has had some wave of unrest for some period now? What do you think?
Well, I think it is not unlikely, because looking at the political scenario in Ethiopia in the last couple of years, we realize that it was like the hand of Esau and the voice of Jacob. It was like there were some forces behind him who were teleguiding him. Maybe he got to the end of the road for himself and felt, look, I can't continue this any longer, since I cannot wield or exert the powers that the Constitution has, endowed in me, since there are some forces teleguiding me, because it's like, there are some forces in the main party in power,
yeah.
And even the military. It was like there were some forces there who were, holding him, his hand to the back. It's like his hands were tied, like we used to say it right here in Nigeria. So I think it is not unlikely that those must have been the forces, that told him it's time to go. Or maybe he himself felt, look, I can't continue being your surrogate.
But still, it still boils down to the question of the unrest the government has had to grapple with, talking about the Oromo and the Amhara region. Now, with these groups, having to spearhead what we now see is happening in Ethiopia today, do you think perhaps, the people that have been calling for being marginalized for some decades now, I'm preferably referring to the Oromo now,
groups
do you think that they will finally get what they want in terms of representation in government?
Well, it depends on where the pendulum will swing. But one knows very clearly that in as much as this unrest continues and the aspirations are not met, it is very unlikely that the unrest will do that. So one expects that the release of prisoners, as well as the clampdown on the opposition, as well as the media, will be relaxed. And one believes that in as much as the people have their charter of demands on the government, there must be a minimum, level that the people want the government to meet. And so long as the government is not willing to meet that minimum demand, I think the unrest will continue. But one just hopes that whoever is stepping into the saddle, will realize the consequences of this unrest on the economy as well as the well-being of the people of Ethiopia.
All right, Dr. Johannes, as we speak, there is yet to be a new, prime minister in the country, and there are speculations on who would likely take over the saddle. But from your own perspective, who do you see will likely take over from Hailemariam Desalegn?
A great question, Esther, but I would like to go back a little bit and comment on the last question that you mentioned to my friend here. What really happened in Ethiopia's modern history, or even before that, was, of course, there is this historical narrative of ethnic oppression. But what's been very much apparent is not that the ethnic oppression that existed throughout Ethiopia's history somehow targeted only the Oromo. That's not the case. Because if ethnic oppression really existed in the country, it was not only against the Oromo, but pretty much every ethnic group in the country, number one. And number two, the second narrative that's basically gaining momentum, and even the current president of the Oromia regional state, Mr. Lamma Magarsa, and his vice president, Dr. Abiy Ahmed, who both of these individuals, by the way, are two of these potential candidates for the prime ministership. They have come out and said there has never been an ethnic oppression in Ethiopia. However, what existed, right, and what basically marginalized the Oromos or any other ethnic group was class oppression, which is very much an antithesis to the TPLF, right, which is very advocating the fact that this ethnic oppression was a major issue that we have to solve, and therefore federal arrangement and all other measurements that are designed to answer political equality questions, economic equality questions based on ethnicity has been basically set up and designed. So having said that, as far as what may happen, who may actually take on the premiership now, I would say this. Of course, there are so many commentators out there, mostly Oromo political activists and all that, stating the fact that an Oromo prime minister would be the right choice. I don't have any problem with that. Whether it's Dr. Abiy Ahmed or Mr. Lamma Magarsa, who are these very charismatic young technocrats, that would definitely be fine for the Amhara or even the large majority of Ethiopians as a whole. But the point is that saying an Oromo is ready to be a prime minister or a leader is basically relegating the question of the Oromos and also other ethnic groups, because Ethiopians did not ask for, this question of like who is going to be assuming the premiership. Ethiopians asked for democracy. Ethiopians asked for greater political freedoms, fairness in the economic or political sphere. So today we do have a Speaker of the House who happened to be an Oromo. We have the president, right? The president of the Ethiopian Federal Republic is an Oromo. The foreign minister, minister of the Ethiopian government, the foreign minister is an Oromo. So expecting another Oromo to assume the premiership will not be solving a problem. What, however, solves the problem is introducing these critical democratic reforms. If really Mr. Hailemariam Desalegn abdicated his political seat, his premiership, because he wanted to facilitate democratic reforms, what really needs to happen is that the government needs to rearrange the electoral commission, invite a political opposition to come and participate in the national dialogue, and we can add so many important reforms. So what is that?
All right. Let's hold your thought for now. We need to go on a very quick break. You're watching Africa Today, and we've been looking at political developments in Ethiopia following the resignation of Hailemariam Desalegn. Welcome back. Ethiopia's Oromo and Amhara people, who make up about 61% of the country's population, have been staging mass demonstrations since 2015, demanding greater political inclusion and an end to human rights abuses. In August 2017, Ethiopia lifted a 10-month state of emergency imposed after hundreds of people were killed in anti-government protests demanding wider political freedoms. Now, Nelson, from what Dr. Johannes says, he definitely believes that the country needs to come together as one, irrespective of their ethnic, differences and all. But my question is, should this always be the case? Because we always have issues of ethnicity, tribalism in African countries when we know that we are pursuing one particular goal, which is let us have a government that represents us at the center for our own good.
Well, one fact you cannot run away from Africa is that in as much as ethnicity and religion is predominantly the sentiments that beclouds reasoning, you must also recognize the fact that a lot of Africans are, ignorant. These are people who are not politically conscious, who lack the access to basic education that will open up their minds to the real issues. So it is very, very easy for the political elites, to manipulate the masses, the downtrodden, using the instrument of religion and ethnicity. Right here we are sitting, all over the world, the analysis of what is happening in Ethiopia is that there's political unrest because of ethnic, divisions due to the fact that some ethnic groups feel that they have been marginalized over the years. Most especially the two main leading ethnic groups in Ethiopia, the Oromo and the Amhara. So, and here we are now with the facts at our fingertips that, look, even the ethnic groups that are claiming they have been marginalized, they are well represented. It's just like what happens in every other African country where ethnicity has become a big issue. So the only way out is for the government to, to come to a round table with, all the stakeholders and try to assuage that feelings of marginalization or that feelings of they have been discriminated against, and lay the cards on the table and chat a way around it.
Now, Dr. Johannes, what role do you think the international community can play to stabilize the country?
Well, thank you so much, Esther. That's an excellent question. Just to comment on what Nelson mentioned, I cannot really agree more. He's absolutely correct. Ethnicity is a very salient political issue, and it will not go away, right? Thanks to colonialism, thanks to some of the historical perspective that we can look at in Africa, that will be the case. But in Ethiopia, the point is not about replacing an ethnic minority's domination by a tyranny of a majority. What we are calling for is fairness. What we are calling for is for the people to come together, form their own coalition, and basically elect their own government by democratic means, which is using the electoral system. So, having said that, coming back to the international community, of course, especially Amharas in the United States, and also some Oromo groups have been working extremely hard to pressure the United States Congress to come up with some House resolutions, and I think that's been very, very much successful. But also, when you look at the statements that the United States government, the embassy in Addis Ababa just made, and also the European Union, they are all against the state of emergency, which is very much out there right after they say we are very much ready to enact reforms. They just come up with this state of emergency declaration, which is designed to stifle opposition, which is designed to basically make sure the people will not have any freedom of expression. So I think the international community can definitely play a great role by making sure, the government officials, the political elites who are basically holding political power in Ethiopia, understand that recognizing their people's demand, right, their constituencies' demand is extremely important, because authoritarianism, right, it's made to stay, but it's not going to survive in the current political climate in Ethiopia.
Now let's look at how far this development can go in the whole political landscape of Ethiopia. What implications, or rather, what implications do you think the Prime Minister's resignation would have on the East African region, particularly?
That's a great question. Ethiopia happened to be the second most populous nation, of course, next to your country, Nigeria. And at the same time, we have a Muslim population, right, that is very much bigger than the Sudanese, the Kenyans, Somalians, Djibouti, Eritrean, all Muslim population of these countries combined. The Ethiopian government in the military is playing an active role in the Sudanese conflict, whether it's in South Sudan or the South Sudanese conflict versus the Sudan, but also in Somalia, right? And we are at this crossroads now. The country, Ethiopia, is at a crossroads. And it definitely will have greater implications in terms of what happens in the Eastern African region. So that is why, going back to your last question, the international community needs to take this very, very seriously and make sure that they inform the TPLF, which is a political party, one of the four within the ruling coalition, but a political party that basically controls all the intelligence and the military apparatus of the government. They have to let them know that democratizing the country is very much key. It is key to the stability of the nation. It's key to the stability of the region. And most importantly, if they want to be part of this transitional process, right? Because we don't have a transitional justice history in Ethiopia where the government that's going away will be very much celebrated, right? It just happens very much in bloodshed. So what needs to happen is basically, as Nelson said earlier, basically coming around the table, discussions with opposition. By opposition, I'm referring to opposition that the country, but also opposition that they ask.
All right.
So, the most important solution that we can hope for.
Much, Dr. Johannes, for your contributions on Africa today. It's quite a pleasure to have you say all that we need to know concerning that region at this time.
For having me.
All right, let's wrap up the show with you, Nelson. From what he's just, proffered now, definitely dialogue, from also part of what you say, is the best way to go in all of this. But in a nutshell, how would you sum up what is happening in East Africa today and what lessons can be learned generally?
Well, the lessons that can be learned is that, the wave of democracy, has, caught up with almost every part of the world. And until and unless institutions or people wielding political power realize that, they should let go of their authoritarian grip on power and allow the people unfettered access, their natural, abilities to be exhibited under a democratic system. So long will crisis continue to fester.
All right, and at that point, let's thank you very much for all you've said on the program. It's a pleasure, Nelson Ukujumi, for your analysis on Africa today. From consistent protests to persistent crackdowns, Ethiopia finds itself at crossroads with the eventual resignation of Prime Minister Hailemariam Desalegn, setting the stage for a crucial succession race that is likely to shape the future of the East African nation. The country's only hope for peace lies in sincere concessions by the ruling political class through tangible distribution of its political and economic power ahead of an election in 2020. And that is our package for today, but don't forget to join the conversation as usual on Twitter at TVC News NG and follow me for updates around Africa at Esther TVC News. On to the next one. I am Esther Mopariola, and always remember, this is Africa. Bye for now.